If you've been around Central Oregon for a while, you've probably heard the name George or G.P. Putnam. He was the son of a wealthy publishing magnate in New York who came to Bend in the early 1900s with his wife and essentially built the Bend Bulletin.
And G.P.'s wife was no shrinking violet either. She had crayon money, as Jim Kroll, who literally wrote the book on the Putnams, tells us more.
She was an heiress to the Binney and Smith Crayola Crayon Corporation, and she's on a summer expedition to climb Mount Whitney, and the leader of the expedition is G.P. Putnam.
George and Dorothy start a one-year letter-writing courtship that ends rather well.
So they marry in the fall of 1911. He has to miss the pounding of the Golden Spike here in Bend when the railroad comes in.
Dorothy loved to entertain and threw extravagant parties, but she holds one very prized distinction.
She was the second woman to vote in Oregon. She entertained visiting suffragettes who were promoting the idea of women's voting.
By the time we get to 1912, we've already had 5 votes on Oregon's women's suffrage issue, and 5 times it's failed. So what's different in 1912? Well, part of what's different is who's moved here and who's moved into the eastern part of the state and broadened the voter base. It's through Dorothy that some of the leading speakers of the time in the state come to Bend and spend time here campaigning for women's suffrage. As near as we can tell, the women of Bend were probably the first in the state to use their new suffrage in that election in December, and Dorothy raced home to be back here in time to be able to exercise her first chance at voting, which is really cool.
Now, eventually, they both had to move back to New York, where George put his heart into the publishing business, and Dorothy put her heart somewhere else.
By this time, Dorothy has become involved with a 19-year-old Yale sophomore. She's 39. And Putnam had no idea about this.
And neither did Jim, who had interviewed Dorothy before her death. She took the secret to her grave.
None of this came out until the mid-90s, when Dorothy gave her secret diaries that she had been keeping since 1909 to her granddaughter.
Now, Dorothy's granddaughter contacted Jim one day with a respectful heads up.
I've written a book about my grandma, and you're not going to like it. And I thought, what's for me to like? She said, did you know my grandmother had been keeping this secret diary all those years?
When Jim heard about the affair, suddenly the last thing that Dorothy told him all those years earlier all made sense.
When it came to what happened between Amelia and G.P. and me, let me just say that there was more than enough blame to go around for all of us. And I'll never forget that. That's really a great line, but I have no idea what the hell it means. Well, now then, when Sally published this book, then I knew what she was trying to tell me then, but she held it all those years.
One of the interesting side notes to this story is that George Putnam himself also took Dorothy's secret to his grave.
I chalk it up maybe a little bit of respect to George, that he was willing to not air that dirty laundry and be willing to, carry the flag of, he was just the middle-aged guy that left his wife for a younger woman and not dispute that, when in actuality it was, not a happy marriage, and yeah, it was a little bit different than that.
For Central Oregon Daily News, I'm Scott Elness.